Every club. Every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Daily Villa podcast as part of the Global Sports Podcast Network. My name's Craig Burpsall and I'm delighted to be joined by Zach from our friends at the GSPN Southampton for a special crossover episode. Today we look forward to the Saturday's game where 7th place Aston Villa take on Southampton, who are currently rooted to the bottom of the Premier League. How you doing today, Zach?
Yeah, I'm doing well, thanks, Craig. It's a day. What can you describe as probably the worst game of football I've seen in a long, long time. My co-host, unfortunately, isn't joining me today because it was his birthday yesterday. He's gotten sick off of the back of being out there in the rain, and now he can barely talk. So I'm doing a lot better than him, put it that way. But yeah, still reeling a little bit after getting home so late last night and knocking out a post-match review and waking up and being miserable at the scores and social media and all the like. So yeah, just living, getting through it. Yeah, it's been difficult, but I'm sure we'll survive in the sense of the football club will hopefully exist at the end of the season.
Well, fingers crossed. And obviously it's the time of giving, so fixtures are coming fast and furious now. It's the Christmas period. On Wednesday, Aston Villa were able to put a bad run of results to bed with a win against Brentford 3-1. Southampton, as Zach just alluded to on the other side, played against a confident, high-flying Chelsea and lost 5-1 at home and had Stevens sent off. Was it just a bad day at the office, Zach, or did you get any positives from it?
We went into this game not really knowing how to feel about it because I think midweek kind of throws you off anyway, especially a midweek that's a Premier League game. We ended up being about 2 or 3 minutes late to the stadium, so we got to miss the entirety of Amazon Prime's budget being blown on fireworks in the sky, which lit up the entirety of Southampton. So you sort of get in, and as we got in, I watched the first goal roll in, and it was very much like perfect. That's exactly what you want, a set piece goal. And then obviously we equalised pretty quickly, and that was really nice. It was like, oh great, this isn't what we expect. And then straight away, the second goal is another mistake, and it just kind of compounded from there at that point. But obviously the big turning point was Stevens getting sent off for a silly challenge. I'd say challenge. It wasn't a challenge. He just pulled someone else's hair like it's a playground. It's mad. Never seen anything like that before. But that was probably one of the most upsetting parts of the evening. And then we had some weird interruptions. At one point, the ref disappeared down the tunnel. Everyone thought he was going for a whiz. Turns out, I think he just had a mic problem. And then about 5-10 minutes after that, we had a pitch invader who was just on the pitch for about 5 to 10 minutes. Our stewards spent extremely long time. I think he ended up getting taken off the pitch by a member of coaching staff. And obviously, as soon as the game restarted, Cole Palmer scored. And I think it must have just been everyone was tired, wet, switched off, didn't really know what was going on. And then obviously the fifth goal was just an extra one. So there were some positives, not a lot. Some players did put shift in. Kyle Walker-Peters played amazing as usual. Nathan Wood had his first sort of proper game at home, proper Premier League sort of game, and he played okay. Didn't play the best, but he played a lot better than the rest of them. Manning played pretty solid. Obviously, Aribo scored. Archer had one of his best games. So, like, there were players and individual performances that were great. It was just as soon as that sort of red card happened, everything had to be defensively shored up. And we actually probably played better for about 30 minutes. Not that we created anything. And then it kind of sort of fizzled out after that. So, yeah, it could have been worse. It could have been 9, and I think most Southampton fans have sat at a 9-0 at St Mary's at least once in the last couple of seasons. So it was alright with it being 5 in the end. Oh.
It's like you're due one of those 9-0 every year.
It is.
It's like kind of a quota, isn't it? I've seen 100%. Them quite a few at Southampton. And I do have one question based on what you said. And does that mean the pitch invader was on the field more than Stevens?
No, but he probably should have shored up our defence a little bit better than Stevens did. And no, I think he was just having a laugh. He obviously had a bit too much to drink, and it made an entertaining second half for what was for most of us a not very fun second half. But yeah, I think he probably he certainly contributed more to the second half performance than Stevens did. I think at that time he was probably tucked home in bed already, which is a shame.
Well, I think one of the positives that we take away from that is the fact that, and I mentioned it on our own podcast recently, that I feel Chelsea are on the borderlines of being title contenders. I think they've really sussed out their team now. They've got a good, dominant, say, 22 players. If they can get rid of that deadwood that's past that, I think they've got a real good chance of pushing on for a City that's aging, that needs to change their team, a Liverpool team that, let's be honest, will probably suffer a blip at some point, and it will depend on how Slot deals with that. So I see the fact that you came up, as I said, that against a very confident Chelsea. Villa know too well after being humbled by them right before your game as well. So Chelsea are a real good team. On the other hand, from a Villa point of view, this past week, I was very pleased to see a bad run of results put to end with a good performance as well. My question for you, Zach, is what do you think about Villa in general? We're obviously not having as strong of season as we did last year, and we've struggled in recent weeks. Is this a game that Southampton feel that they could potentially get that upset?
I think that the way that our team play and the sort of what the manager tries to instill, whether or not that's successful or not, is that every single game is individual and that there is no such thing as an upset. Like, we've tried to take the game to everybody, tried to take the game to City, to Arsenal. There's no weaker teams. There's no sort of, the mentality is that we will try and win no matter what. Doesn't ever go that way at the moment, apart from that one cheeky win against Everton. But it's one of those things where I think they'll be up for it. I think that he will need a reaction. I think we've got players that have come back off suspension that will want to maybe right a few wrongs from the midweek. So I think that we'll try and put a good game in. However, I also do think that if we if you hadn't have won this game, the most Southampton thing to happen would be that you batter us 5-0 and we end up breaking that losing streak, because we are very good at giving strikers. Of all people yesterday, Jadon Sancho scored a goal. I completely forgot he even played in the UK. So, so it's one of those situations where sort of I think that we might end up maybe getting sort of a ball draw off the back of it if we're lucky. But my opinion on Villa is, considering the rough kind of seasons you had and to be in the position you are now, and as much as you're struggling with it a little bit at the moment, some of the personnel and the quality that you have, and even a couple of years ago, losing sort of your key man and still managing to recover. I've got a few friends that have been Villa fans for years and go up and down to Birmingham and stuff, but it's one of those things where I'm like, you are now an established Premier League team, and you are now established and pushing and doing well in Europe. So ultimately, regardless of whether or not you've had a rough few games and a rough start to the season, we need to treat you with that level of respect. And you have some players that we would love some talent. I feel like I say this to a lot of clubs, but there's a lot of talent that a lot of the clubs have in the Premier League where we would just we would kill for just one or two of the players that you've got, because that could make the difference to the way we play. Unfortunately, it's going to be real hard to recruit for Southampton at the moment. So yeah, no, I've always been big fans, and I'm glad to see you guys do well, especially as a sort of opponent to the big six that we don't like to see do too well.
Mm-hmm. It's very true, and I'll be perfectly honest. When I say an upset, it's based on current form more than anything, because I think one of the reasons we love the Premier League as much as we do is because anyone can win on any given day, and that's what makes the Super Six prediction that we all play and everything like that extremely hard to win, because there's always that one game that can be the dagger in your side if you're trying to win the pools or whatever, that really stops you every single week. And when we came back from the international break, we were struggling going into the international break with Villa, and we were convinced that on the podcast that the Palace game was going to be the one to right the wrongs. And I don't know if it's a sense of an underwhelming game, if you will, that it's not like a game that we have to rise to our ultimate heights, like when we played Bayern Munich, for example. But we really limped into that game, and I'll be honest, we were lucky to get the point out of Crystal Palace, and Crystal Palace have struggled this season as well. So I have fears going into, say, like a Southampton game, because we have some players that really rise to the occasion when it's there, but the quote unquote about like the windy night in Stoke during the week and stuff like that. Those are the sort of games that worry me. And we like last season we didn't have much worries. We really didn't. We turned up to every game expecting to win. Confidence was high, and I know this win against Brentford has done a lot to help us. I do not think, though, it was the sole answer, and we can go into Southampton expecting 3 points. We have to earn for it. So, 100% agree. So, my next question for you, Zach, is, and this one's mainly for Villa fans because your own fans will have heard this all season, but going into the season, how did Southampton feel the season was going to go? Did you expect this type of struggle?
I don't think we expected it to be this extreme. So you know, our podcast is two people wide. It's me and Greg. I am the pessimist. He is the optimist. He came in sort of picking and choosing where he thought we'd get points and had us finishing 12th, which is insane. I expected us to be in the relegation season. I personally think we came up a little bit too early. You know, ultimately we came up through the playoffs and we finished fourth. We didn't finish, you know, in the top. If Leeds hadn't absolutely bottled it, they would have probably rightly have kept their squad and come up most likely stronger. Same with Leicester. Ipswich are a bit of a surprise, but they're proving their merit. I don't think we expected it to be this bleak. I think is where I'm at. Like 5 points from available, 42, and just the way we've lost some stuff. And I know that VAR's played a part in some of those games, specifically Brighton and things like that. But also, yeah, I think maybe we thought the recruitment would have been slightly better. So I think we were under no illusion it was going to be really, really hard to stay up. But then, like, we did, you know, we got a statement signing in sort of Ramsdale. There was a little hope with Lallana coming back in. And there was quite a few sort of moments where it gives you the hope. And that's the problem with being a Saints fan. It's a tagline me and Greg always say, which is the hope that kills you. Because we similar have those sort of similar games to you that you were talking about with sort of like you really hope that they'll step up. And there's the amount of times that we have a game where we're like, this is do or die time. And it feels like there's nothing at stake at the moment. It feels like it doesn't matter what the manager will do, he won't get fired. It feels like a lot of the players whose contracts are ending know that they're going to move on to somewhere brighter. And it feels like a lot of the players who are stuck here are probably going to hope to kind of leave at the end of the season. And there are those that do try and fight, but the problem is when it's 3 out of 11, it's not good enough. But I think a combination of things have meant that we kind of expected to be in a relegation battle, but we're now resigned, unfortunately, to just being in a really hard place to kind of deal with mentally as a fan. And even like, you know, I'm not a season ticket holder, but Greg is, and, you know, dragging his poor kid to, on his birthday, reading his sort of little magazine with his birthday wishes in the rain whilst we watch us get battered 5-1 at home to Chelsea. And we're all singing, you know, singing about how we've got the ball because that seems to be the most important possession stat. But yeah, I think if you contrasted the scenes of, say, when we beat West Brom in the semi-final of playoffs and sort of going to Wembley and winning at Wembley to now, I think that we would have hoped it would have been at least somewhere in the middle. And now it does seem like it's about to turn very doom and gloomy unless we get a miracle. And I don't even think if we win this weekend that would be the end of it. Because it would feel like a sticky plaster, but the chances of us winning are also I don't know. I don't want to do the percentages, but quite low probably.
One of the things that surprised me about Southampton is because you see it from, say, like a likes of a Leicester, for example, and other teams like a Leeds that have come up and everything. It's a case of that Southampton's been here and done it before. It's not like a Luton, for example. They came up, they tried their best and everything, but they got engulfed by the situation. And in the beginning, it was like amazing. Oh, we're going to Manchester City. Oh, wow, Liverpool's next, and so on. It was like an experience. But as I say, Southampton have been here and done it before. Has there been like major turnover in the background staff where like the experience wouldn't be there?
Yeah, it's one of my favourite things, sort of stats to pull out usually, is how many players in the last Premier League game we played against the club are still actually at the club. And I think that if you look at the season we last went down, we had 3 managers in very, very quick succession. We had Hassan Hutel. He went after, you know, some really bad run of results, which looking at it now is farcical. We ended up having looking to be manager of Hull, Ruben Sellis, for a little bit. And in between that, sandwiched right in between, was Nathan Jones, a Championship manager who created more sound bites than I think results for us. And the outpouring against him was kind of crazy. And then obviously we got relegated, and then they brought Martin in. But that season we got relegated, we also got new ownership by a little team, a little bunch of guys called Sports Republic who didn't really know what they were doing, put us into a load of debt, got us relegated, didn't hire a good enough manager, and haven't really managed to get a good enough manager yet. And they sort of brought Russell Martin in from Swansea to try to get us through the Championship, and have completely doubled down on that decision, regardless of whether or not a lot of fans are trying to, saying we should get a Ruud van Nistelrooy, or to be honest, who's going to want to pick up the project at this point? And they seem to be far more focused from a background perspective of running a multi-club project. So there's another club in Turkey that they run, and it seems like we are a money-making machine. And I don't think they're that bothered. Well, at least it seems that way. They don't seem that bothered, and it's kind of, so from a fan's perspective, you're right. There is this expectation that we are a Premier League club, and we should be a Premier League club. But you look at the ownership, and you're like, it doesn't seem to sort of match up with the fans, and maybe we should at this point be making more noise about that. But it's very sort of, it's weird how quick we've been, including myself, to be honest, of how we just accepted mediocrity, because we have gone down and come straight back up. But it feels like the squad, the stadium, the background, everything is just completely different, which is bizarre. So yeah, you're right. There's a history there, but there's almost feel like I'm supporting a different club to who I was supporting 3-4 years ago, and there's not a lot we can do.
And as a Villa fan, I know far too well about that. Before we had the current ownership, we had Dr. Tony, we had Randy Lerner, we had a bunch of people that came in that had their own ideas. Like Randy Lerner was one of the worst things that ever happened to Villa, because as soon as his American football franchise started echoing money, he took all the money out of Villa and threw it at that, and we suffered for years. And then obviously we were saved by the current ownership that came in. And now, with the exception of our argument over ticket prices, it's all been on the up and up, to be perfectly honest. And speaking of Villa, we've obviously just, as I said, we just got to win this past weekend, but that is one win now out of 9 games. Is there a part of you that wished you played us last week when our confidence was absolutely shot?
No, because again, from a Southampton perspective, the most Southampton thing to do would be to allow you to build that confidence up. The thing that I'm latching onto right now is the thing that you've also pointed out, which is that kind of worry about not switching off just a little bit, and people just assuming because of our position that we can't play good football, because on our day we can. The problem is it usually only lasts about 30 minutes, and then something will happen, and then everything will go wrong. But if it can happen for longer than 90 minutes, you get a result like we got against Brighton, who were second when we played them. They expected to batter us about 4-0, and it ended up being a draw. Which arguably, if the goal that was supposedly interfered with had counted, could have been 2-1. Right. Probably would have ended 2-2. But that's one of those situations where that's when we're taken for granted. So I reckon, had you played us devoid of confidence, we'd have gone in with confidence, and you'd end up just completely destroying us. So I actually am glad we're playing you when we are. And also, if we played you as our last game, it would be the same as when we played against Chelsea, where half of our players were missing. We're still going to have a few people missing, but we should, hopefully have a bit more of a chance, he says, crossing his fingers and toes and everything inside.
Speaking of the starting lineups, we will discuss those after a short break with Zencastr.
Here at the Global Sports Podcast Network, we spent a lot of time selecting our delivery platform. Zencastr came out the clear winner. With 4K video recording from your phone and AI editing that automatically removes all those ums and ahs, it's super easy to start a podcast that sounds great and is delivered efficiently. If you're ready to tell your story, check out the link in the show description to learn more about Zencastr.
Welcome back. Southampton will be without Stevens, Ramsdale, Lallana, Basnu, Bednarek, Onach, Stewart and Smallbone. This seems to be a long list of absentees. Due to this, how do you expect Southampton to line up this weekend, Zach?
It's going to be difficult because we've either got our third or fourth choice goalkeeper. It really depends on who's deciding to step up on the day. Which the style of football we've play already has shown that having our third or fourth choice goalkeeper in goal is a problem, and any goal we sort of give away is usually a gift. Presser is until I think tomorrow, but we've got hope that maybe Bednarek will be back from injury. Same with Onuachu, but the problem with that is that we were also told they would be available for the game on Wednesday. They weren't. So who knows at this point? I think there's likes to keep some information to his chest, maybe to get the opposition to waste time looking at players that aren't going to be there. Injuries have battered us a little bit. Like I think losing Ramsdale has been awful because of the way we play. Bazunu's been out now. I think he's been out since the championship. He had a really nasty ACL tear. And Stewart's another long-term one where apparently he's not going to be back till next year. So yeah, I couldn't see it being all the suspendees from Wednesday will probably come back in. So you'll probably end up having Flynn Downs back. We'll probably end up having Taylor Harwood-Bellis back. I don't imagine that like Toolpool might be on the bench, but I think that I don't think he'll start him. I think me and Greg would like to see him start because we would really like to see what it is to put two strikers on the field at the same time. It's been a while since we've seen that. And if Bednarek has to swap out for Wood, I think Wood put a good shift in Wednesday and probably can step in. But yeah, we'll probably not anything too dramatically different to what our normal lineup would be, but I think it's starting to show that our depth is not great. And I think that Wednesday, if anything, proved that our recruitment has been patchy, if patchy at best. Dibbling will be back, which will be nice because he's been an absolute revelation for us this season, having an 18-year-old homegrown star who has essentially been like probably our best transfer and was just out of the academy. Right, keeping that Saints tradition of us actually having homegrown talent. So yeah, that's what I'd expect to see at the weekend. I don't expect to see anything too surprising, but there's also a day or two where people can get injured, and considering no one really expected Ramsdale to be out for 2 months, it's kind of just a tetchy, wow, let's hope that doesn't happen, but it could do in the end.
I have to ask you, because you mentioned the way we play, I think was the quote you used. One thing that I've noticed from Southampton, it feels like a week-to-week basis, is the amount of mistakes that are happening when playing out from the back.
Yeah.
And one thing that I really don't understand, as someone at coaches at a very much lower level, just with youth players and everything, I feel it's getting to the point now where teams have to play this way because it's the in way to play. And I don't understand the need where teams, and I'll include Villa in this as well, the amount of times we've struggled with playing out from the back this season and costed sloppy goals. I don't understand this logic where we have to play this way. Do Saints fans feel the same sort of frustrations?
Yeah, 100%. If you sit at St Mary's and you watch us put a pass back to our keeper, and then our keeper fluffs it, and you can see that they didn't want to play. Like me and Greg were close enough yesterday to see Stevens have an argument with our goalkeeper at the time around what was going on, because obviously he wanted to chip it out. Stevens is saying, we have to play out from the back. That's how we've, he's getting shouted at every time he does that because none of us want to see it. Because the problem is that I don't think we've got the quality to play the way that Russell Martin wants to play. And his kind of philosophy seems to have been, well, this is what got us here. And I'm like, well, it didn't. There was a couple of times where we lost quite heavily in the Championship because of exactly the same reasons. And you give Premier League players an inch and they will take a mile. And you saw that yesterday with, Lumley gave 2 or 3 just clear goals straight to Chelsea. And yeah, it's not something we really enjoy. And the problem is that it was okay when we would see a result from it, but we're not. And we can play well for 80 minutes. And it's exactly what I was saying earlier. The sound bits are, well, we're playing 30 minutes really good here, but then 3 silly mistakes are what lost us the game. I'm like, but those silly mistakes are really consistent. So I don't understand why we wouldn't try and change it. And at this point, you can't work out if it's because Russell Martin doesn't know how to coach any other way, which apparently he does, because that's been questioned to him before. Arrogance about how he wants to play, or also sort of, he always said he'd live by the sword, die by the sword. And it's just a reluctance to kind of throw everything away and try again. And that the only reason that I can see that he's not willing to change is that he can't see that his job's at threat. Because I feel like if you're getting to the point where it's desperation and something isn't working, and every single week it's the same mistakes in week out, surely at that point you'd go, right, well, something needs to change. That's not even football. That's just logic. But it doesn't seem to be something we're willing to do. And I'm thinking it's just like he's waiting for like a moment where all of a sudden it clicks into gear, and maybe he thought the personnel we brought in September would help do that, but they haven't. And what is left is a championship side that were able to do it, but still, lost 1-0 to like Rotherham at one point last season. So who knows? But it's very upsetting, and I don't think anyone really enjoys it. And people consider it to just be death by stupidity, because you just watch a pass go right past your goalkeeper, and then it's been sort of, we've been bailed out. But yeah, I think we have the highest amount of like individual mistakes that have led to goals, and I just don't see that changing. And I don't think anyone's really happy watching it, because it's hard to watch week in, week out. I'm not gonna lie.
Because I don't understand the logic, because like it was the same with Vincent Kompany when he was at Burnley the previous season. He lived, and as you said, lived and died by the sword. He played the same way. He came up, you had a good time, now you're back in the Championship. So I don't understand that logic of not bending. I'm not saying completely throw away all your principles, but at least play to your strengths. At least play to understanding where it's going wrong. Like, even though it's not exactly going exactly according to plan, I liken this to Mikel Arteta at the moment at Arsenal. He's got a strong quality team, but he's understanding that he can't necessarily play like City if he wants to beat City. Sometimes he's got to sit in deep. Sometimes when there's a red card, he's got to park the bus. Like, I didn't think a couple of years ago I'd be saying these things about Mikel Arteta, but I think he's growing in the game of understanding. He's not getting it right all the time at the moment. He's still a pretty young coach, but I feel like he's understanding where players, and I'll even say Unai Emery at times has done this as well, where there's only a plan A, there's no plan B. And if that doesn't work, then, well, what's next? So I would feel that as a Southampton fan, because I look at these highlights, I'm like, I just don't understand why these keep happening. It's not just Southampton, see it at the Villa too. But it really does frustrate me. And I imagine, obviously, if I'm frustrated as a neutral watching Southampton, it's going to be brutal being a Saints fan. So on the contrast for Villa, I'll talk about the starting lineup. I feel we'll see Martinez in goal. He was in doubt before the Brentford game, was in pain. We had potentially heard he broke his hand, but it seems to be okay. He played very well against Brentford, so no problems there. I would imagine our back four will consist of Cash, Konza, and Dean. And I wouldn't be surprised if Mings is kept in the team for this game, because he played extremely well against Brentford, picking up a man of the match support. It sounds a little harsh because Torres has played really well this season. With the exception of the Chelsea game, he had a rough game in the Chelsea game, but it wasn't enough to be dropped. But we've got such competitive positions now. If you bring someone in and they do a good job, just like you were saying about a few of your players did a great shift in the week, it's very hard to put them straight back on the bench. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Mings. I think because of the type of game it is, and I'm not saying we're looking down on Southampton, but I think he will give an opportunity to Philogene. I think Bailey has had a good stretch of time. He hasn't performed as well as we know he can. And he's also, when I say a lot of stretch of time, there's a lot of stretch on those legs. So I think that could be a potential one as kind of that protection for a manager. Yes, you're not playing well, but I'm not dropping you. I'm giving you a little rest. So to give Philogene an opportunity to impress. I would imagine Tielemans and Kamara will start in the middle. But that's another one that's doubtful for me as well. Tielemans has not been performing as well in recent weeks. He's been one of those players on this podcast that we've highlighted greatly because of how much he's improved since he joined the club, and has been a quote unquote starter since he's found that form. But recent weeks he's struggled, and I think his legs might be tired. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Barkley jump in there as well. Still too early to bring Ramsey back. He's still injured, so I would expect to see McGinn on the left. The only other doubt that I would say is because of an interview that I heard with Emery the other day, where he said he's ready to put Buendia in the starting lineup in exchange for Morgan Rogers over the Christmas season, just to give him some breaks, because Morgan Rogers has been ever present for the Villa since the start of the season and performed exceptionally well against Brentford this past week. The only criticism I would have is that new haircut. That was absolutely atrocious, but forgive him as a young lad. And then I would expect to see Watkins up front. So, Zach, based on the 11 that I've kind of predicted, is there any concerns that you have for Southampton, like who's going to cause some damage? Or on the flip side, is there any areas that you think Southampton could look to exploit?
At the moment, it's any opposition we play I'm terrified of. But because the thing is that, again, if you've got anyone that's hungry for a goal and anyone that's up front that is able to exploit a mistake, that is unfortunately where most of the goals have come from. We have seen some strange goal scorers against us in recent sort of weeks, and that's because, but obviously having a player like Ollie Watkins, you guys do amazing. Tielemans has always been a personal favourite of mine. I used to sign him up early on Football Manager. I have a weird affiliation for Anderlecht of all clubs, mainly because I went to go and see them play at like 2013 up in Belgium. So he's always a player that I've followed his career, and obviously he plays really, really well for you guys as well. So those are sort of the main things that I am scared of, because you will be able to find ways to get past us, and that is the problem. But if we can find enough space, we can get sort of people like Matty Fernandez up front, and we can actually get some crosses in. We've been looking more dangerous. Our problem is the final third. Once we get around a box, we give everyone far too much time and space to be able to come in and sort of, with the sort of people like Mings and the sort of with the goalkeeper that you have, it's just I struggle to see us doing anything other than maybe a goal. And if we do, it will have to be really well worked and well planned, because the vast majority of our goals have kind of come off almost by accident or have been penalties. So it's one of those things where I think it just shows the contrast and the differences. You have such a level of squad depth. The fact you're able to talk about swapping out really good players for other really good players is something that we just haven't been able to experience. Like when it's something about, I think I summed it up in our podcast a while ago when we were talking about like the Arsenal bench and the players that they were able to bring on, and in comparison to when you're bringing on, if you've got like Gabriel Jesus and stuff like that, and you've got us bringing on Paul Onuachu, who most people don't know and have only known recently because of the game he had against Liverpool, where he seemed to turn into prime Lionel Messi for 5 minutes. But other than that, the only thing that you'll find on YouTube is a highlight reel of his 3 goals at, I want to say, Genk he was at, which are probably one of the worst hat tricks I've ever seen. But and somehow he's up for the Pukas this year. But I just think that my problem coming up against nearly any club at the moment is just that I think that you are able to exploit us from all places, and that is the issue. But mainly it is going to be probably the fact that we are going to have a goalkeeper who is going to be primed to make a mistake, and you pass a ball like that to Watkins, and Watkins putting it in the goal, simple as that. So it's a fun, terrifying prospect. I'll have to sort out my FPL for the weekend as well.
Yeah, and from a Villa point of view, I feel a high press will do us well to try and force those errors that I mentioned out of the back of Southampton. So I think that will be the tail of the tape when it comes to it. If Southampton can bypass that initial press, if you will, I think your guys will stand more of a shot. I do think that if we go into this expecting a win, we could always be suffered. Because like you mentioned about Southampton, I feel Villa have been very generous with with teams, oh, you need some points, here you go. You haven't scored away from home this season, congratulations. And we've also showed this season as well, not in the Champions League, surprisingly, but in the Premier League, our lack of ability to be able to keep that clean sheet. So at the moment, if we need to tie up that back line, and that's, again, we couldn't keep the clean sheet against Brentford despite it being comfortable for long periods of the game. Very off the run of play when they scored. So that's going to be really interesting. We are going to take a short break right now, Zach, and when we come back, we're going to talk about those dreaded predictions. We're going to ask you to put your money where your mouth is.
The Global Sports Podcast Network is changing the face of football podcasts. With dedicated daily content for every Premier League team, women's football, fantasy football, and a daily Premier League wrap-up broadcast in 5 different languages, it's your one-stop shop for your daily football fix. Find GSPN wherever you find your usual podcasts.
Welcome back. We've been talking about Villa and our upcoming match with Southampton. And as I say, now is the time for those dreaded predictions. So, Zach, I'm going to put it on you first as our guest today. How do you think the game's going to plan out, and what's your prediction?
See, it's a difficult one. Greg is usually optimistic. He'd probably say something ridiculous like 5-0. I'm pretty sure he thought we were going to win the other day as well. I'm pretty sure I actually said we might end up beating Chelsea if those fringe players wanted to put a shift in. But alas, it went a completely different way. I reckon it'll be a 1-1. I reckon it'll be a ball draw. I think maybe the overconfidence from Brentford will show, and we'll be able to score potentially early on, or alternatively hit you directly after. We will concede because, like you, we just not been able to keep a clean sheet. So that's why I think if they can shut up shop and actually try and keep out mistakes, we'll be so focused on that we won't score, other than maybe the one. However, we will also concede because that is unfortunately just part and parcel of being a Saints fan at this point. So that's where I'm at. That is a positive prediction for me.
It's funny because I'm along the same sort of lines, because my heart is telling me we're going to go out and do that one performance every Villa fan has been craving for, that dominant 3-0, 4-0 victory. Like, my heart tells me that, but my brain isn't telling me that. So I think we're going to narrowly get the win with a 2-1. I wouldn't be surprised if it was a late goal that we ended up picking up in order to get that win. I know every win counts and everything, but we are looking for that one performance where we can say, yes, we're back at our best. So fingers crossed from a Villa point of view, that's what I'm looking for. So, well, that's about it. All we've had in time for the Daily Villa podcast. Thank you very much, Zach, for joining us from GSPN Southampton. We wish you the best of luck, Zach, for the rest of the season, after Saturday, of course. Be sure to get in touch across all our socials that you can find in our podcast description. This has been the Global Sports Podcast production. Thank you for listening, and up the Villa.
Every club, every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.